You're no stranger to basketball reference and baseball reference and, some of the stuff. So when you're following the Mahomes Brady stuff, what's your instant smart guy reaction to all of this?
Ooh. Man, I don't know much. I don't know if I have an ability to improve on, I think, a take that you had maybe earlier this week. Mahomes clearly has the best start to a career in the history of NFL quarterbacks. He combines the physical talents of Aaron Rodgers with the regular season statistical achievements of Peyton Manning with the postseason statistical achievements of Tom Brady. And we've never seen anyone do all of this at the same time. Rodgers didn't have the championships. Peyton didn't have the championships. Brady didn't have the regular season stats. So he has the triple crown of excellence for the first decade of quarterbacking. But again, and I might just be ripping off your point, but I think it's the right point. What makes Brady Brady, what makes LeBron LeBron, you could even say what makes Jordan Jordan, because he came back and won the three-peat again, is longevity. And
that was Kobe more than anything. Kobe, the second part of his prime was what elevated him. What he did from 2008 to 2012.
Yeah.
Right when it's supposed to be going backwards and it went the opposite way, which is what happened to Brady.
And that's what we don't know. We don't know what the next decade and a half of Mahomes' career is going to look like. We don't know if he's going to get as lucky as he has been. And this is one place where, I was a Peyton fan more than a Brady fan. And so I became adept, I guess you could say, at making excuses for Peyton Manning. And one of the excuses I would make for Peyton Manning is Tom Brady's absolutely fantastic, but lots of his Super Bowls were really won by the defense. They were won by defensive coordination. And to a certain extent, I think you could say, of Brady's career, he was both extraordinary because he had an individual ability and extraordinary because he was inside of a context where if he didn't have it for a Super Bowl, say it's the early three Super Bowls, maybe, I mean, he was fantastic in some of them, but the game against the Rams, for example, where they absolutely shut down Jared Goff, there were a couple of Super Bowls he didn't put up 20, 30 points and he still won. And that's what I felt about Mahomes this year, where even if he didn't have it for 2.5 quarters, right? And he scored what? They scored 6 points in the last 2 quarters of the AFC Championship game and the first 2 quarters of the Super Bowl. Like they barely scored it all for 4 straight quarters, but the defense was extraordinary and it kept them in it. And that's also Brady-esque, to be within a system that always gives you the opportunity to be the hero in the fourth quarter. I mean, it's an extraordinary early career. And what's going to determine whether he's the GOAT is whether he can keep it up, because that's the difference between, a Larry Bird-style career and a LeBron-style career.
Yeah, I think the cool thing is that we have somebody who has a chance to be legitimately great versus when we try to talk ourselves into somebody being great. And to me, it's like, it's a little bit of a it when you see it. It took a while for Brady, but it really wasn't until the 14 and it's kind of that middle 2010 stretch that he went up a level, where he was having a great career, but he was going to lose statistical arguments to Manning, and Montana had the 4 Super Bowls, he only had the 3, and then it ascended. The interesting thing with Mahomes is that the inevitability that we were talking about on Sunday's pod is already there, where you feel like, oh man, they left the door open. This is a wrap, which is such a rare quality. I don't even really know if LeBron ever totally got there as an NBA player. It was like, oh man, they left the door open. LeBron's closing it now. It was never, Jordan was the only guy in the last 30 years that you would really feel like, oh man, they fucked up. There's too much time on the clock. It's such a rare quality in any sport that just to have somebody that has it again is pretty cool. Tiger had it forever. We were like, oh man, he missed that putt. The other guy missed the putt. Tiger's taking him down now. This is a wrap.
I wonder if that's an idea, the inevitability belt. If you went back 30 years and looked at who has the inevitability belt right now, right? In the late 80s, early 90s, even in the mid 90s, you'd say Jordan clearly has it. Maybe in the 80s, you'd say it's Gretzky with the inevitability belt.
Or Bird. I really felt like Bird was in there probably mid 80s, and then Gretzky too. Yeah, but the thing is, Gretzky's team was so loaded. And I know Gretzky's, I think he's the best ever. But that team, it was almost like the team had the inevitability belt. It's like, oh my God, you just gave the Oilers a power play. This is over. They're definitely scoring, There's some
the
boxers that probably had it too.
Yeah, I remember in the fourth quarter and in overtime when in both cases, I walked over to my friend in the Super Bowl and I was just despondent because I was rooting for the Niners at the time. And I was like, he's going to do it. He's going to do it. And it was so interesting to see everyone use the same word, inevitability. Like that's when you've reached a point in the cultural consciousness where everyone expects you to do the impossible and you do it. Like that is a very special moment. And I agree that does feel more Jordan-esque and Brady-esque than it is, LeBron-esque.
The sport that has the most of this is tennis, because it almost seems like a prerequisite for being a great tennis player is you hit this point where, it's like, oh man, that guy double faulted. He had a chance to take down that set. Federer's taking him down now. Mm-hmm. But it seems like that there's been probably as many tennis players combined who have had the inevitability as all the other sports. It's so hard in football. Manning never had it, in my opinion. No. There were stretches, but then he would have like the Saints Super Bowl and he just never got over the hump. I do feel like Montana had it when in the 80s to some degree, but the game was so much more violent back then. Like that. I don't know if you've watched that Jim Burt hit when he knocked Montana out in the championship game. It is like, if this happened now, we would be like, oh my God, we have to ban football. All right, coming back. Future of everything. We're doing, what did we say? Sports, culture, tech, and health.
That's exactly right. That's what I got.
Well, let's leave sports for last. We'll go in reverse order. Why don't we go health first? What do you got for health? The future of health.
We got to talk about the Ozempic revolution. There's so much to say, and in plain English, we did 2 podcasts about it. But fundamentally, I want to summarize those 2 podcasts right here and say there are 3 things that I think most people are underrating about the Ozempic class of drugs. And the first is right there in the name, the Ozempic revolution. In so many ways, Ozempic is old news. Ozempic is what's called a GLP-1 agonist. It mimics a gut hormone called GLP-1, which glucagon-like peptide 1. But that's just the start. There's another drug that a lot of people have heard of for diabetes and weight loss, Mounjaro or Zepbound from Eli Lilly, which mimics 2 hormones, GLP-1 and GIP. And that's not all. Eli Lilly's testing another drug called tirzepatide, which has 3 targets, GLP-1, GIP, glucagon. And with each additional pathway and each additional target, they're seeing more effectiveness. So tirzepatide in phase 2 trials is showing on average 25% average weight loss. That is crazy. We have stumbled onto an absolutely revolutionary drug class. But that leads to number 2, which is that most people think of these drugs as weight loss drugs. And I am on the train of no, you should actually maybe think of them as psychiatric drugs that work through your gut. Like, we don't know exactly how Ozempic works. It's one of those spooky stories of like, we built the machine and then we learned the science. But one of the most important things...
By the way, that makes me nervous. And that's all this stuff like makes me super nervous. Because like, no, it's great. It's like, is it?
Yeah, and I want to talk about that in just a second. Because we did these 2 episodes, and one of the interviews was with a guy who just talked about the downsides. So I want to hold the downsides for a second. But this is really important on the psychiatric part. These drugs seem to send a message to your brain that says, I'm full. But that's not the only message that they send to your brain. One trial found that people on Ozempic went on longer walks. There was a Morgan Stanley survey that found that patients on GLP-1s ate 60% less candy and 40% more vegetables. It seems to reduce smoking for smoking addicts, gambling for gambling addicts.
Gambling I've heard of, yeah.
And even for some compulsive nail biting. So it's kind of like, this is the way I conceive of it.
See, that's how you know I'm not on Ozempic, because of the gambling and compulsive nail biting. Yeah, I'm still 100 out of 100 on both.
It's almost like you have these, the angel devil on your shoulder when you're making certain decisions about cake or gambling. Yeah. And what this seems to do is like, it turns down the volume of the compulsive voice and allows people to have more moderation over their behavior across categories, not just food, but nail biting and gambling. And that's where, again, you can call it amazing, you can call it spooky, you can call it purely effing terrifying. But the way these drugs work is essentially like a psychiatric drug. And I as a journalist, find that completely fascinating.
I would go with spooky. What was the third thing?
Oh, the third thing is, so there is concerns that, and this is a real concern about these drugs. I definitely don't want to make it represent like I just think everyone should take them and in the end it's a miracle drug. One of the big problems of these drugs is that with really fast weight loss, people tend to lose both fat and muscle. And for older people, and really for anyone, muscle retention is really important. Like there's no 90-year-old grandmas out there that are like, I wish I had less muscle. No, like sarcopenia is bad. So what they're doing at Novo Nordisk, the Danish company that makes Ozempic, and Eli Lilly, they're starting to think about pairing these GLP-1 drugs with muscle retention or muscle growth drugs. And so the Ozempic revolution is stimulating a revolution in muscle growth medicine. And it's possible, Bill, that like the way the Ozempic revolution like cashes out for someone like you or your friends isn't weight loss drugs at all. It's that downstream of the Ozempic revolution is we uncork some discoveries about muscle retention and muscle building. And a lot of people end up taking a healthy, FDA approved, muscle retention, muscle building drug that happened because all these companies were pouring all this money to counteract the effects of GLP-1 drugs. So a lot of people are going to hate that. They're like, well, you take one drug and it creates a problem. You take another drug that creates another problem. I don't like the path that's leading down. But as a journalist who's just interested in this as a phenomenon, it's fascinating to think about Ozempic as being the beginning of a revolution in a lot of different aspects of bodily health.
Yeah, you're basically saying safe steroid.
I don't yet know how these. There's very little information yet about how these muscle drugs would work. But the effect, I suppose, would be essentially that of a safe steroid potentially.
So the muscle mass thing is the part that has been swept under the rug with this, because I know a couple of people that are using one of the drugs, and one of the things that they're being told is you have to go to the gym more. You have to work out. You have to, because you're going to lose muscle mass. So you got to like basically replace the muscle mass. If you're going to do this, you're going to lose weight, but then you also have to put the muscle back. That made me super suspicious of just all of this in general. It's like, wait a second. So I'm losing weight. I'm going to, some of these urges I have are going to be tempered down, but I'm also going to lose muscle. I've never heard of anything where you're going to lose muscle other than like being super sick or having cancer or something. So that's why I almost feel like with these drugs, they came so fast. And I know a bunch of people that are dabbling. It feels to me like when the first iPhone happened or the first Vision Pro happened, and then they perfected it by the third or fourth or fifth time. I don't know if I'd want to dive in on the 1.0 version of all these drugs. It just would make me nervous, but I'm more of a hesitant person with stuff like that.
Well, I validate the fear. I definitely don't want to be a guinea pig either. And the fears about muscle loss are absolutely legitimate. I would say though that because GLP-1 drugs have been around for 10 or 15 years for diabetics,
yes,
people taking them now are not the guinea pigs. People who were taking them in say 2006, 2008, they were the real guinea pigs. They were taking a drug that had never been tried before. At this point, we have 10, 15 years worth of data for drugs like Ozempic, and it doesn't seem like there are significant long-term side effects or side effects that present in that medium term. That said, this goes to a second criticism of the drug, which is that if you stop taking it, you tend to not still enjoy the benefits. It's like statins. It's a drug that you do seemingly have to take for the rest of your life. And a lot of people are going to be really uncomfortable taking a drug like this for the rest of their life, especially when it changes the way they think about the world so dramatically. So this is serious stuff. I hope in the podcast I did, and again here, that I represent both the wonder of these drugs, that obesity is a huge problem in America. And there are all sorts of cancers and diseases that are downstream of the obesity crisis in America. And this seems to really combat it. But at the same time, it's a serious drug. The side effects for some people are very serious. You do have to stay on it for a long, long period of time. And it's true that you have to worry about and think about the muscle loss, because muscle retention is so important for longevity and just living a healthy later life.
Well, think about in the 80s and 90s, those fad diets that people would do and they'd lose the weight. And then you stop doing the diet and what happens? And then in some ways it's even harder for your body to lose the weight the second time. There's sub versions of this that are a little less Ozempic-y, where peptides have been around for a while, right? There's been, modified versions of peptides just to maybe get it going a little bit, but not exactly the same. I guess the muscle mass part just in general is the part that makes me, all right, I lost all this weight. Now I'm off Ozempic. All right, now I'm putting the weight back on and I've lost 20% of my muscle that's never coming back. So I don't know how that's a win. So in a way, they're trapping you to just take this stuff forever, which I don't that makes me nervous too. Because like who benefits from that? The people making these drugs.
I think you're right to see this as a cost-benefit ratio. And that makes us focus on the benefit. If you have 30, 40% of Americans who are obese, and we don't have an answer to obesity at the food system level. We don't have an answer to obesity at the behavior level. There's no masterclass that we can show people online that gets people to totally change their diets. This is one of the only things that works. And if people who are suffering from severe obesity, and I should say, it also seems to help people who are type 2 diabetic, but if someone's suffering from obesity and they haven't been able to lose weight and they take a drug that has a relatively safe side effect profile that causes them to lose weight, and also wherein the doctor encourages them to go to the gym a lot and lift weights.
That all sounds positive.
That's altogether an obvious improvement. But you're right to point out that, all right, for some people, this is an obvious diagnosis or prescription. But for a lot of people, it's a marginal cost benefit. And I think it's really important to be clear about both the extraordinary promise of these drugs and the very real fact of their side effects and downsides.
I'll tell you this, very popular drug in the Los Angeles area.
Is that right?
Yeah, there's... want to do culture next? Let's do culture next, then we'll do tech, then we'll finish with sports. Give us culture.
Okay, so culture. A few years ago, I played around with the idea for a book that I ultimately abandoned. And the title of that book was going to be Everything is a Cult. And everything is a cult, you have to start by defining what is a cult, right? A cult is an intense and relatively novel movement that defines itself in opposition to a mainstream, right? Fundamentally, it's about how the normies are bad. It fosters intimacy within the group through a blend of resentment and superiority over the mainstream, and adopts ideas or rituals that bind people within the group, but those same ideas and rituals seem effing insane to people outside of it. And everywhere I look in media, I'm like, I see more and more cults. So the first place I started to feel like everything is a cult is in news media, our business. News media to me is clearly becoming more cult-like. I don't know if you saw Tucker Carlson's little videos from Russia. I don't know how... you're on frequency.
Those. Yeah,
you skipped those.
Wasn't
okay.
on my radar.
Okay, so Tucker Carlson takes his little X video team to Russia, and it's not what he said, or he had this 2-hour-long interview with Putin. It's the way he sold what was being said, which I'm starting to hear everywhere. The media is lying to you. They, and it's always that amorphous, undefined they. They don't want you to know the truth about the war. They don't want you to know the truth about reality. This is advertising by conspiracy. It's straight out of the cult playbook, right? The mainstream is poison. It's designed to build this allegiance around a cult. And it's funny that even non-Tucker news sites that are launching, their thesis upon launching is always they've got it wrong. No one in sports is covering sports right. We'll get it right. No one in tech is covering tech right. We'll get it right. That's what you have to say to enter the mainstream. And as a result, in order to be a new entrant, you have to criticize the mainstream. So media is becoming cult-like. Celebrity fandom is becoming cult-like. I'm not just talking about the Taylor Swift fans. Love you guys. The fragmentation of media means you have all of these incredibly powerful affinity groups in YouTube and TikTok forming around people that most Americans have never heard of, right? Culture splintering off into cults. Politics, finally, clearly is becoming more cult-like. It's not just polarization where Democrats don't even understand MAGA Republicans, and MAGA Republicans have no idea why anyone would vote for Joe Biden, but also the big sort, how people move around the country means that the two sides barely speak to each other because all the liberals live together and all the conservatives live together. So culturally, my sort of future of everything in culture is that the erosion of the mainstream across categories, news and politics and celebrity media, has turned culture into a portfolio of cults. And that's made it really hard for people to talk to and understand each other.
That's really good. It's like cult. Sure. It's almost like a hyphen.
Right. Yeah.
Cult.
Right. Exactly.
Cult. I went on Dana Carvey and David Spade's podcast. It hasn't run yet, so I don't want to spoil too much, but it was really fun. But one of the things we were talking about was when they were on that show in the early 90s and they did this sketch. It was the Partridge Family versus the Brady Bunch, and Susan Day was the host, right? So I was in college, and literally that sketch, everybody watching that sketch understood the sketch because we had all grown up with the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family. There was 2 generations. We only had a couple channels. So it's like, this is like a 100% approval rating. And we were talking about like SNL in 2024. I think one of the problems with it is there's no sort of mainstream backbone like that anymore. Like if you're 18, what's your backbone? It's like Taylor Swift. Maybe it's some NFL stuff. I don't even know if the NBA is in there. You might have an opinion on Olivia Rodrigo, but then everything else splinters in all these different directions. So what's the version of the Brady Bunch Partridge Family sketch 10 years from now for my daughter when she's like 28? What is it? What are her common culture experiences with everybody else? It's basically like Taylor Swift and a couple songs and like those Netflix movies with Jacob Elordi, you know? And the other piece of this is Netflix is a way bigger piece of this now than I think people fully realize, because this whole generation of 22 and under, that's the first place they go to. That is cable, basically in general for them. So anything that's been on there in the last 10 years is some sort of reference touch point to them. And then it just turns into all these TikTok, like the David Dobrik, all those, the YouTube and all the Mr. Beast, all that. And maybe that's what it is, but I don't know how you would have uniformity on what that Partridge Family Brady Bunch sketch is. I don't know if it exists.
And I feel like I almost wish we could like bring in Klosterman here to talk about this, because I know that he's obsessed with this subject, but I am so interested in the relative anonymity of enormous hits these days, right? Like how a YouTube clip can be absolutely ubiquitous among 18-year-olds. And I don't know who made the clip. I don't understand what they're talking about. It might as well be an alien speaking in a foreign language. I mean, there are, to a certain extent, the popularity of even big podcasts like Rogan, where there'll be some crazy viewpoint that's shared there for 25 million people. I won't even hear about it for 6 months. And it's like one of the biggest news platforms in the world. You can do this for so many different hits. One thing that I found, I think I was talking to Matt Bellamy about this, when Netflix released its hours watched list.
Oh my God. I was
first half of last
fascinated by that list. It was like the Night Agent.
So right, the Night Agent was watched something like 7 trillion hours. The Mother was the most popular movie or one of the most popular movies of the first half of the year. In the 6 months of data that was shared by Netflix, The Mother, I think, was one of the most popular films. And I did the math. And according to the math, had to be fact checked by this, The Mother was watched the same number of hours on Netflix as Barbie was watched in movie theaters in 2023.
Wow.
So I'm not saying The Mother is bigger than Barbie. That's not my point. Barbie's going to be released or has been released on whatever it is, Max, and it's going to get another trillion hours of viewing there. But in the same period of time, as much time was spent with humans watching The Mother on Netflix, according to Netflix, as people sitting in movie seats watching Barbie. I don't know what The Mother is. I had to look it up. And so this relative anonymity of hits seems to me to be absolutely downstream of the phenomenon of culture is now a bunch of cults.
Well, and also, how do we measure audience? Because like The Night Agent, which is a solid show. It was like in the 24 phylum. It was like 24 for the 2020s. I watched the entire show. I don't think I fully watched even 5 minutes of it. It was on and I was kind of looking up and doing work and looking up. I'm like, oh, but if you like quiz me, if you gave me a quiz right now and like, what happened on The Night Agent? Can you name 4 characters? I'm not kidding. I watched every episode. Can you name 4 Night Agent characters? I cannot. How did The Night Agent end? I just remember something was outdoors and people blew up. So I think it's almost like passive viewing is at an all-time high, but like, I don't know, in the 80s, like we watched shit because that was it. It was like, I'm going to watch this. What else am I going to do? And now it's like with people doing 5 things. So when I saw those Netflix numbers, to me, it was like the passive watching. Like that show, The Summer I Turned Pretty, Amazon. My daughter likes that show on Amazon. My wife watched it, but if I quizzed her on it, I don't think she would be able to name 2 characters. But I know she watched the whole show. There was some movie they had this week called Players. And my wife was watching it. It was a rom-com, but she wasn't really watching it. She was texting with my daughter. We FaceTime, and it was just kind of going. And that just seems like where we are now.
Ginny and Georgia would be that for my wife. I've seen probably 6 total minutes of Ginny and Georgia walking in and out of my bedroom while my wife, folded clothes or sat with our dog or did work in the bed. Ginny and Georgia was on. Might as well have been like
and Ginny and Georgia get in a fight, and you're like, "Oh, what's going on here?" And you watch for 2 minutes, and then go back to the laundry.
Right, exactly.
It's weird. It's weird times for content. One of the things, I don't know if I'll get in trouble for this, but one of the, Spotify, they do all the data on what like podcast consumption, and what they've really found with the data over the last few years, and it's not rocket science, but like everybody has their 5 to 7 podcasts, and that's it. It's really hard to crack that list once you have it. People have their go-tos, right? They might love you. And they're like, you know what? Derek's on twice a week. When I see that pop up, that's my guy. They don't have 30. It's 5 to 7. It might be less than that. It might be 3. It might be 2. Maybe it's 8, but it's somewhere in that range. And that's real consumption. But when you think like, how many podcasts are there now? Like 3 million, 2 million?
Right.
To actually build a hit, to actually get traction is harder than ever, because not only are you competing against the 3 million pods, but you're also competing against the circle that you've already decided on. Like 2024, I guarantee, maybe you were listening to a little more because you're a media consumer, but just in general, you're going to have your hits. It's like an NBA team. I can only play 5 guys. I can play 8 guys max. That's it. That's all I can do. Any last thoughts on this, or should we go to the next one?
Let's go to the next one.
All right, let's take a break and then we'll go to the next one. All right, we're on good pace. All right, future of everything. We have 2 left. I mean, this is, I'm on the edge of my seat for this one, but wanted to know what your future of everything for tech is. Let's hear it.
All right, so last year for future of everything for tech, I did AI. I still think there's really compelling evidence that AI adoption.
Yeah, good call. Solid. A W for you.
I could keep talking about it, but the truth is, I don't think there's a huge demand for me to keep talking about AI. I said everything I had to say about it last year. I want to talk about Vision Pro, about Apple's new mixed reality headset. And I want to talk about it in a way that might be a little bit unexpected. So the reviews are rapturous. The price is exorbitant. The price is in fact so high at $3,500 and really more when you add all of the add-ons, that I'm a little bit interested in how it acts, how it works in the marketplace of attention. Like I could imagine rental markets. I could even imagine like movie theaters that sell Vision Pro access. Like you can get a seat, you can get an IMAX seat, or you can get a Vision Pro rental where we, antiseptic wash the Vision Pro. We put it on your face. You're not watching, Oppenheimer on a screen. You are immersed in Oppenheimer. I'm interested to see, for example, I think Ben Thompson wore it on a plane. Our mutual friend, no relation, Ben Thompson, wore it on a plane.
Yeah, I had the same thought.
I was thinking, what if United, for $150, rented sterilized Vision Pros to people in coach to allow, or in first class, to allow people to immerse themselves in Barbie or whatever. You won't even notice if you're sitting in coach that they've, shrunk the distance between coach seats by 6 inches if you're strapped into your Vision Pro. So, they get an extra upsell. They put a Vision Pro on your face. They get to jam more people into the airplanes. But the point I really wanted to make about Vision Pro is that it's the extrapolation of a trend, which is ever higher quality screens, ever improving resolution, ever more content, as we've just been talking, delivered closer and closer to our faces. And in the last 15 years, you and I, and everyone we know, have participated in an experiment. We've been enrolled in an experiment to see what happens to the human brain as we spend more and more time in front of screens and less time in the physical world. And Vision Pro is the most spectacular screen that's ever been invented. I just wrote an article in The Atlantic about what I called the sudden decline of hanging out in America.
It was good.
In the last 20 years, Bill, average socializing time, average face-to-face interactions between humans have declined 30% for men and women in America and 50% for teenagers. And most of that decline has happened in the last 10 years. What happens when we make screens 10x better? I don't know that I want to know the answer to that question. It's not clear to me that even though I'm a huge technology booster, I'm a huge fan of physical world invention, it's not clear to me that better and better screen technology is really the medicine that we need to fix our problems. And so I am both kind of excited about Vision Pro, but also like fundamentally concerned about what it says about the future of human psychology.
Kyle, was that dog bark audible? You can just cut my mic for that part. All right, pick it up. So obviously I read Ben's review and it was just classic Ben. He was mad at certain things, but then when he started talking about what the experience was on the plane, that was the first time I was like, oh, might have to get one of these. And your brain starts going, all right, what else would this look like? Could I watch a Celtic game from my dad's seat? Is that where we're heading? Is like, I put these things on, which we've been talking about really for a decade, but I put these things on. What are the possibilities? Am I all of a sudden in an IMAX theater? Am I all of a sudden courtside at a Celtic game because they put a camera on the basket support right under the basket? And now I'm sitting courtside with the best seats in the house, watching these guys, and I'm able to turn and go. This goes back to what we're talking about with Ozempic. Like, I want to know what the 3.0 version of this thing is. As the experience gets better, as they figure out stuff, the part you said about how this will lead to less interaction, less people being social, less people wanting to be around other people. Maybe that's just where society's headed. That's my biggest fear. Is like, it's not just like people are hanging out less. Are people going to want to hang out? Are people going to still want to be with each other in 15 years? If we hit that point, like to me, that's a fucking game ender. If we're not interacting with each other, and it's just, I would just rather be home with my Vision Pro on, and I'm 40 years old, and that's it. That's going to be my Friday and Saturday night. It's just not. I don't see how that's normal for your brain.
I don't see how it's normal either, and it's really hard to predict the future of technology. But one thing that kind of freaks me out a little bit is, as you think about various, use cases for Vision Pro, one of them is that it allows any space you're in to be turned into your living room or your home office.
Yeah.
So you think about a coffee shop and you think about the culture of a coffee shop. You think about the historical role that coffee shops have played in human history. They've been places where people come together and share ideas, launch revolutions, launch political parties, sometimes just hang out, get a little bit of work done and hang out with your friends. Coffee shops are a really important third place, not your home, not your office, but a third place that builds community in any neighborhood. What if a bunch of people realize that with Vision Pro 5.0 in 2027 or whatever, you can go to a coffee shop and you can put your opaque glasses on and you can just turn that coffee shop into a virtual home office with 17 different screens that you can use to do your day trading or your Excel filing or your
people are just
podcast
watching
editing.
you from 5 feet away?
No, Bill. No one's watching you from 5 feet away because they're wearing their Vision Pros too. And so the coffee shop ends up being
it's a pro coffee shop?
So I'm saying if this technology becomes as ubiquitous as the iPhone, then it's not just everyone with naked faces and the ability to see each other looking at their iPhone. It's everyone with these opaque goggles on, sitting in a coffee shop, doing their work, turning that coffee shop into their home office. I mean, there's a way in which that sounds maybe weird and dystopic, but it's actually, you could see how on a one-to-one basis, for every individual person, that's a benefit, right? They're like, oh, it's fun to be able to go to a third place and get my coffee and then turn to my home office. But collectively, it ruins the culture of that coffee shop. It ruins the culture of third places.
So why would I go to the coffee shop with my goggles on if I could just do that at home? What's the point of even being in the coffee shop?
Oh, because
I'm near other people.
You want to get away. You want to get away from your family. You want to get out of the house for the first part. You need to be closer to the office.
Right.
Maybe you like to go to that coffee shop.
Yeah.
Get away from your roommate.
Kids.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
And you always have the ability, of course, to just take off the goggles and then walk around and get your scone or whatever and bring it back to the table. So it's a way to be away from home while also creating whatever kind of room you want to be in.
Still sounds depressing.
It does. It is, and that's why. I think that I'm simultaneously interested in, what Vision Pro represents for content, what it represents for entertainment, how, for example, it could allow you to enjoy to sort of like co-stream your father's experience of a Celtics game, that sounds kind of cool to me, right?
Yeah.
And an amazing like 3D version of like Madden 27, that seems kind of cool to me. So it's not as if I want to write off the metaverse entirely and say this is only going to be bad. I don't think that at all. I just think that we need to analyze the societal implications of a technology like Vision Pro as if it's the extension of all other screened technology. And what screen technology, the history of screen technology, I think teaches us is making more content ever more available to us. Yes, allows us to amuse ourselves, but often we choose to be alone when we're amusing ourselves in front of these screens. And that kind of sucks because it means that socialization declines by 50% among teenagers and anxiety rises to all-time high levels. So I'm not trying to exclusively like shit on the technology, but I do think that especially with the like the rapturous reception that Vision Pro got, we should sort of keep in balance the incredible achievement of the tech with its possible negative implications for society.
So if we had a tech czar and this person was in charge of basically all behavior and things we're allowed to do with all the tech, like within reason, and the tech czar was like, you can use these things, but it can only be for 3 hours a day. We don't have enough studies yet to know how damaging this could be if you're using this for 10 hours a day. People will be like, no way, that's not constitutional. We can't do that. But it really does seem like these things should have time limits. I think all this stuff, should you be on your iPhone on FaceTime and all the social apps for more than like 4 hours a day? Probably not. They're never the parents can put time limits on it for their kids. But do we need, like when I think about this Vision Pro thing, what if somebody's just on their Vision Pro for 14 hours a day? What is that going to do to their brain after a while? Are they even going to be able to interact with other people after like 6 months? There's so much we don't know.
Yeah, there's so much we don't know. And, the metaphor that I've used before is that social media in particular, and I guess to a certain extent you could say screened content in general, is a little bit like attention alcohol. Now, I love whiskey and I love wine. And I don't drink beer as much anymore, but like I love making mezcal cocktails. So I drink a lot of alcohol. But there's also like an understanding with alcohol of how much is too much. And we have a social infrastructure and social vocabulary around telling each other and telling ourselves you've had too much to drink. And you should drink this with water, and you should drink with responsibility, and make sure that you eat food before you drink. We understand
Kyle,
to a certain extent because we've lived for thousands we've lived for thousands of years with this technology, and we know how wonderful it can be, and we also understand that we can use it to excess. To a certain extent, I see screens as being analogous because I think that the iPhone is unbelievably useful to me. I think social media, frankly, even Twitter, is incredibly useful to me. I'm very happy that Netflix exists. I've gotten a ton of joy out of it. And the truth is, I probably will use the Vision Pro at some point in my life and do something that's a lot of fun with it. So in that way, all these technologies are kind of like attention alcohol, but we need a clearer understanding. So if I'm the tech czar, I'm like, let's study this. We have so much research on the effect of alcohol on our livers and our minds and our metabolism and, rates of substance abuse and, how to wean people off of it and the effect of Alcoholics Anonymous. Why don't we have any of this for social media? How do we build the sort of research backbone for a similar understanding of what this is doing to our bodies? That's where I would start before, ramping down, like the CCP and essentially saying like, you can't use this technology. No adult can use this technology for more than X hours a day.
It feels like we're in the same spot with gummies and microdosing. We're all like gummies. There's so much more trial and error in the gummy community and the microdosing community. And it's like, oh man, I took 2 gummies yesterday and I was under my bed for 9 hours. And that just kind of popped out of nowhere. We know people here who like they just microdose every day now. And it's like, no, it's totally safe. It's like, is it? Didn't this stuff just start a couple years ago? No, it's like, my mood's much better now. It's great. Is it?
We had an episode on the show about ketamine. And about
ketamine's another one. Yeah,
about psychiatrists researching the effects of ketamine because as I'm very interested in mental health. Ketamine seems to have incredible effects for reducing depression really quickly and for several months. So it's different than, if you see a therapist, which many people should, that effect can take a long time to materialize. With ketamine, it's really fast. But what's interesting is even experts don't really know what's going on. They don't understand the mechanism. Is it the high that people are responding to? Is it the molecular experience behind the high? And so, yeah, we're allowing ourselves here to be guinea pigs for drugs that do seem to be doing something good, but the mechanisms of their success are pretty mysterious.
Last thing on the Vision Pro, like you buy one, your wife can't use it, right? It's tied to you. That's what Ben was saying. Like you can't buy like a family Vision Pro and then just anyone could put it on. It's tailored specifically to you.
I don't know enough about that to be sure, but let's say that Ben is right on that point.
That seems like something they could adjust for the 2.0, 3.0. Like the price is going to come down. Maybe it's tailored almost like how you have the Netflix account with the 5 people on it. That just seems like that's probably where we're headed for future iterations. All right. Last one, sports. Are we doing microdosing for the NBA? Where are we going?
You stole it right out of my mouth. It's microdosing for the NBA. No. So here's what I want to do for sports. I want to describe to you, Bill, my relationship with the NBA, and then I want you to tell me if I'm crazy. So okay. I listen to you and Ryan and the NBA show and Mismatch. I probably listen to hundreds of hours of NBA podcasts every year. Do you know how much basketball I watch before May? Like probably 20 minutes. Like this year at my best friend's bachelor party, we watched the fourth quarter of a Knicks game at our Airbnb in Florida. That's it. So I was doing the math on this and I was like, my consumption of professional basketball is 100 hours of Ringer podcasts about basketball to every 20 minutes of watching the actual NBA. That's a 300-to-1 ratio of analysis to actual sporting event. And on reflection, I was like, this is kind of psychotic behavior. It's totally counterintuitive. I can't really even explain it to myself. In one interview, I said, it's kind of like the NBA is a piece of audio gossip for me. It's like a reality show that lives in my ears for 6 months that transforms into a live sport every spring. And if this is common, and I get the sense that it is kind of common, that a lot of people have this kind of relationship with sports, I wonder what it means for the economics of sports media from a consumer standpoint. Because there's a way in which I am not actually an NBA fan. I am a Ringer Podcast Network fan who becomes an NBA fan for the playoffs. And I don't know how this cashes out for some sports wherein people become dependent on and reliant on analysis for their entertainment, but they don't actually watch the underlying product. Like how, if you're Adam Silver, do you deal with the fact that attention to and enthusiasm for the NBA might be, going up, but ratings are barely budging? It's a really bizarre phenomenon. And so this mismatch, no pun intended to KOC and Verno, but like this mismatch I find like more common and incredibly interesting, where people are becoming sports fans without consuming the sport.
So basically what you just laid out, which was a great point, is exactly what happened to the late night TV shows.
Yeah.
So if I love, let's say Kimmel, I'm experiencing him either on social or I'm watching like his YouTube thing, but I'm not necessarily going to ABC at 11:35. And you've seen the ratings, like his ratings his first year was like 5-6 million people per show. Now it's probably way lower, but the effect of the show is bigger because it's amplified on all these different platforms. And I think that's what's happened to the NBA. They would argue that the last 10 years have been incredibly successful because look at our YouTube, look at our Instagram, look at our Facebook, look at our Twitter, and the way people consume the clips. I think Wembanyama is the test case for this. I don't think people watch the Spurs. I don't watch the Spurs. I'll go back because they get blown out like 3 out of every 5 games. So I'm not watching them in live time ever. If there's an awesome Wemby game that's like, oh, that was actually a good game, I'll just go in their app and watch the fourth quarter of it and be like, okay, now I watched that awesome Wemby game. I'm not watching it in real time with the expectation I'm going to see an awesome Wemby game. I think people it's really like the cheat era. You can cheat being a sports fan without consuming different sports. I think football is the only one that people still like actually watch in the moment because it's so perfect for visual, and there's the gambling, there's the fantasy, there's the in the moment stuff. It's only, basically it's 17 Sundays, 15 Thursdays. NBA is like, all right, am I going to which game am I watching? There's 10 going on at the same time. I have multiple TVs because of what I do for a living. Most people have one. Which one am I going to watch? Am I doing something else at the same time? I just think people cheat with it. I don't know if it necessarily means the NBA is less popular, because I actually think in a lot of ways it's more popular, but the ratings speak for themselves. It's really one of the only content things where I did this on Tuesday, where the ratings are down. And it doesn't make sense because they've changed all these ways ratings can go up, and yet their ratings aren't going up.
Except it does make sense from the standpoint that when Adam wants to talk about how popular the league is, what does he point to? Everything but the ratings. Here's our TikTok hashtag, and here's our YouTube views, and here's everything that isn't the main dish, right? Here's everything that isn't the core
He's putting it at appetizers.
Product.
Look at our sweet potatoes.
Yeah, right. Exactly. We're the top yams maker in all of sports, and it's like meanwhile, like the steak is atrophying. And so I think I think the comparison to late night is perfect because I can't remember the last time I stayed up to watch late night purposefully, but I have caught so many just browsing whatever Instagram or Twitter, so many different clips of Kimmel saying something or some joke on, I don't watch SNL either, but some joke on SNL. There's a certain kind of media that lives to be sort of aggregated by delay. Yeah. And late night is that, SNL is that. And it's weird to think that basketball is becoming that, because you would think that basketball as a live sport, people have said for so long,
but in playoffs,
it's news and live sports.
In playoffs, that's when it becomes kind of what the NBA is. Yeah, during the season, first of all, the season's too long. We're not positive when people are playing. It's hard to quantify what's a really big game. Like there was a huge game Monday night, Bucks Nuggets. Well, the Nuggets were losing by 20 in the second quarter. Sony was like, I'm not going to watch that. You just go to the next thing. So you can kind of jump off the big games really fast in the regular season. I think the players are in a lot of ways, more famous than ever. And especially like people, the concept of like foreign players becoming as popular as they would, I think that would have been really hard to predict 30 years ago. But it's a weird time. I don't really, you could spin it either way if you're the NBA. You could say, we're in trouble. People aren't watching our games the same way. Or you could say, no, look at this. We wanted this to happen. This is why we wanted our stuff anywhere and in short bites and bigger bites and all these different ways. Look at all the people that are talking about our league. So you could spin it as a success.
And fundamentally, it comes down to what are people willing to pay for the rights? What are people willing to pay to lease the rights to broadcast live NBA content? And I guess the optimistic read for NBA and Silver would be that as tech comes into the sports picture, Amazon has so much more money than the old-fashioned TV broadcasters, and Apple has so much more money than the old-fashioned TV broadcasters. So even though linear television seems like it's in structural and maybe just permanent decline, you're going to get something else to replace the dying cable bundle. And that is, whereas before, sports was subsidized through the cable bundle by all the people who didn't watch sports, because everyone who didn't, watch ESPN was still paying every single month in order to, pay that affiliate fee to ESPN. Maybe in the future, just people who don't watch sports but still shop on Amazon are going to subsidize sports. And so the NBA will benefit from that subsidy anyways, as Amazon comes in and Apple comes in. But I'm interested both in the sports economic side of it, but I'm also just interested in it's kind of like philosophy of entertainment. Like it's just bizarre to me to have like enormous numbers of people relationship with the sport move from I love watching the sport because it's so fun to watch to I love hearing stories about the sport for 80% of the season and then only tuning in at the very end. That's a very odd relationship to have with the sport, but it's absolutely mine. And I just gathered that it's a lot of other people's too.
It needs a name. Like I was thinking as you were talking, you're a shadow NBA fan. Yeah. You're shadowing, like it's something like that where you're shadowing the league and you're ready to jump in at any time, but you're really not actually consuming it. You're consuming the shadows around it, but not the actual content itself. It's some name like that.
Yeah. The way that I describe it to other people is the word that I've used is gossip. That essentially what I'm listening to, my relationships to the league, is I'm listening to gossip about the league. I'm listening to you talk about, here's the gossip from various teams. Here's some the analysis. That's just gossip. It's just talk. I'm just listening to talk. And
well, like the most fun thing that happened this week, I did a little YouTube short on it. Because it was my first thought. And I was like, I got to get this one out. I'm fired up about this one. But when it got leaked that LeBron was getting traded, or that the Warriors asked the Lakers about a LeBron trade, and that the owners talked, that Draymond was lobbying Rich Paul, and then that the Lakers actually went to LeBron and were like, hey, do you want to go to the Warriors or you want to stay here? And he's like, no, I want to stay here, but then all this stuff comes out and you start thinking, well, why did this come out? Who had the most to gain? Well, obviously the Lakers, because they have to play the Warriors in the play-in game probably. The Warriors were doing well. Their chemistry is good. It's like, let's sabotage that. And then you also want to get the message out, like, we gave LeBron an out to leave and he didn't want to leave, so he can't say shit anymore. So that all comes out. That was more interesting to me than any game that happened last night. So you're right. It's like there's this Real Housewives element of the NBA now where it's like, holy shit. And then guess what? The Warriors lost last night. And Klay Thompson was terrible because you put that shit out and there's 3 people that could have been traded for LeBron. And Draymond's trying to convince, allegedly, according to the report, LeBron's agent come to the Warriors. Now, if I'm Klay Thompson, I'm like, well, wait a second. Like, I would probably have to be in that trade. Now you're looking at Draymond kind of sideways. And, it's just like, I think people are more fascinated in that shit during the regular season than the Clippers-Warriors game last night, where the Clippers came back and beat the Warriors. It was like, oh man, look at Norman Powell. Like, the LeBron story is way more interesting. So that's just kind of where we are.
Yeah, I'm a Bravo sports fan. Maybe that's what it is.
Bravo sports fan. I like that. It's better than Shadow. That's good. What else are you working on coming up?
Podcast.
Or can you talk about it?
No, yeah. Friday is we're talking to the CEO of a company that's developing drugs to extend the lives of dogs, and the ways in which life extension drugs for dogs, which have gotten sort of not tentative FDA approval, but the FDA has essentially checked off the progress that they've made, and so this is the furthest
what are we
any
extending?
Company.
Like what? Like how are they doing that?
So the way they're doing it. Selena Liwa is the CEO of Loyal, and they have a drug called LOY1, that essentially inhibits a growth hormone in large dog breeds.
Oh, that spurs cancer. This is amazing.
Yeah, that once they become adults, you can't give it to them as puppies because this is the growth hormone that's making them become large. So once they become fully grown, you can theoretically, if the drug fully works, you would give dogs this drug, and it would hopefully extend their lives by slowing down the production of this particular hormone. And they're working on a couple other drugs to increase dog longevity in a couple other ways, because that one only works for the large breeds, and they care about extending the lives of small and medium breeds as well. So we talk about the future of doggy life
small
extension
dogs
science.
We're probably good with small dogs.
Yeah,
they
got 16 years. Yeah,
small dogs, they live forever anyway.
Yeah. So we're talking about life extension science for dogs and the implications for humans, because ultimately we would love the discoveries from this science where we can test it on dogs, and because they age 7 times faster, we get to learn 7 times faster. What if we learn some things that really, really worked in dogs and then found a way to get that into humans and slow down our aging process as well? It's not about living forever, just about slowing down the aging process.
Well, just wait till we have dog Ozempic.